Hello, my name is Paula. I watch too much TV and too many movies, so I like to talk about that kind of stuff. Um, and I grew up in the 90s. I watched a lot of romantic comedies or rom-coms. I grew up watching things like You've Got Mail, My Best Friend's Wedding, was it The Lake House with Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves? Those kind of things. And they all kind of follow the same formula. I enjoyed that as a little girl, although I always also felt a little alienated after I watched them. I could always tell there was something a little bit wrong, but I still watched it, I still liked it. And now that I see that those formulaic or that specific formula for romantic movies Hollywood's kind of like setting a new trend and not following that old formula as much, I'm kind of relieved. I do see it occasionally though. Like it'll pop up again every so often on some new Netflix movie, and I'll be like, oh, they went back to the 90s formula. Why? And so I kind of want to talk about that formula today. And I'm not going to go into great detail because, like, I've never been to film school or anything. This is just observation from a nobody. So basically, in the cast of rom coms, I feel like you have these one, two, I wrote down my notes here, these one, two, three basic characters who we follow throughout the story, as which starts with the meet cute, where the two love interests meet. So you have that moment. They hate each other, that part, right after they meet. Like there's always some conflict. And then after that, they start to fall in love, and you see the montage of them getting ice cream and walking their dogs or, whatever. And then they fall deeper in love. And then there's the other conflict where usually she gets mad at the dude. And then the last scene, or the almost last scene, where he's chasing after her to win her back. And then there's the end where usually they get married or they just like live together. You assume they're gonna eventually get married. So that's like the formula that a lot of those followed. But the three people who the movie usually centers around are, first of all, your quirky lead female. Um, Usually she was like clumsy and smart, very smart, but she would come across as ditzy, and she'd be like, "Oh my God, I sound so stupid right now." Like she put herself down, and you could see why, because she was just so quirky and a little ditzy and um funny, funny. And she would do those things in a way that would make you laugh or make the audience laugh. I think that executives wanted the female lead to always be that way because actresses, especially in the 90s and the aughts, actresses who were going to be leading ladies had to be exceptionally beautiful. They had to be very thin, um, unattainably thin, and unattainably beautiful. However, if you executives thought, who are usually male, if you want your audiences to be filled, if you want your seats filled, you need women to come to these movies. Men aren't going to want to go to a romantic comedy. Now, please keep in mind, these are not my thoughts. These are what I assume the executives behind the movies are thinking. Okay, men are not going to come to these things. This is for women. This is a chick flick. But women are jealous. Women don't like to watch other beautiful women because it makes them feel less than. So, but we know that we don't want to promote a woman who's not beautiful because that will alienate the men in the audience, because there will be men, because the men will want to bring their dates to this movie. So we need to keep the men interested by having a beautiful female lead actress. So how do we make this female lead less beautiful to the women or more relatable to the women and still sexy to the men? And so they came up with the formula. She has to be a dork. You take this gorgeous Michelle Pfeiffer, Meg Ryan, Julia Roberts, and you make her a quirky dork. She's got to be cute, more cute than sexy. But we can have a couple of scenes where we show her fully sexy, but for most of the movie, she needs to be cute. I think those are the kinds of conversations that executives probably had in like I don't know, with directors and casting or whatever and writers. Um and then usually the quirky female lead, she had a best friend who she would tell all of her problems to. And this best friend was usually a person of color, or maybe struggling with their weight, or a member of the LGBTQ plus community, or all three of those, like everything. And I think more often than not, as you moved out of the 90s, especially, and more into the aughts, that best friend character was all of those things. Usually they were like biracial, a couple of different races, member of the LBGTQ community, and either and struggling with a weight issue, are looking like they struggle with a weight issue, like either super, super, super skinny or more like me, a little bit more heavy set. So, why that? Well, I think that when it comes to putting people of color in those mainstream movies, a lot of the executives did not want to confuse their audiences because in their mind there are black films and then there are normal films. And again, this is not coming from me. This is just what I assume executives were thinking. And they're like, well, black movies, that's for black people. We're not going to make money off of that. Mm, which was really a bad thing to think. So we need to focus on bringing in a normal audience, a normal American audience. So they're like, but if we don't feature any persons of color, no POC, um, and no one from the queer community, we're going to seem out of touch. So what we need to do is have a main character or a star who is all of those things. So we just kill all the birds with one stone. That way we don't need to hire any other people of color, any other or add any queer characters or any other characters who are struggling with their weight because we just have this one and they'll be all of those things. Um, Also, when we want to tell racist jokes or homophobic jokes that would have been okay like in the 80s and early 90s, but not okay now, we'll just write them for this one character to say. And it'll be okay for that one person to say because they are all of the things. Um, so, so I think that's why they always have a best friend who's like that. And then last but not least was the perfect guy. Um, he was usually always white until Will Smith came along. Then they executives started realizing, okay, black men are really hot. Everybody kind of knows that. So they were kind of like, okay, we can have some leading men who are black. Um, and hopefully eventually they'll realize that about other men of color, like Asian men. I mean, when are we going to have an Asian Superman? I know that's not a romantic comedy, but still, I don't know. But anyway, that's a whole nother subject entirely. So the perfect guy, he usually was hot, like attractive, but not too attractive. And I was trying to figure out, like, why? Why wouldn't they, like, let me see. Like Chris Hemsworth, okay, I think he's probably one of the most attractive men in Hollywood. But if we were in the 90s, I don't think he would be in as many romantic comedies as, say, I don't know, someone like Colin Hanks or Tom Hanks. Um, and I was trying to figure out why is that. And I think that they wanted male leads who they thought female audiences would feel safe with. So it seems that and this is going to sound really creepy, but this is just what I was thinking. I could be wrong. It seems like the dad factor was more important to executives than the sexy factor. Um, I think that they wanted leading men in these romantic comedies to be like the dad who most of the women in their audiences never had. Because I think that, and maybe I'm overthinking but I do think that the general perception of women is that women marry or end up with men, not end up with, but they want to marry usually men who are like, who they feel would be like a good father figure. Or a more gross way to say this, because I just didn't want to say it, that's why I keep hemming and hawing. It just seems kind of gross. I think that the general perception of women is that we want to marry men who remind us of our dad. Um, so I do think, like, you know how the dad bod is a thing where people like a dad bod? But for women, nobody, you don't hear people being like, ooh, a mom bod, that's sexy. I don't know. I think it's this thing about safety with men. Like, because most of the executives were male, I'm assuming to them it was more important that the male lead provide women, their audiences, with a feeling of safety and comfort, just like a dad would, instead of, oh, he's hot, like super sexy feeling. Okay. And I mean that it's a thought. It's a thought. But I don't know. That's just what I assume. So anyway, um, I'm kind of glad that those movies that followed that formula are not as popular anymore because they're kind of messed up. Um, they're very messed up because the quirky female lead, I don't know any, well, I do know people like that, but they don't have the lifestyle that those characters are usually depicted as having. Um, like the female lead being super hot and yet kind of a dork. You usually in real life you don't see those two things. Those two things don't happen in one person. um, it's just unrealistic. And like for me, okay, I am an actual dork. Okay, so me, a little black girl, growing up watching those movies, and they're all like these Julia Roberts. I keep saying her because I can't think of anybody else right now. And Meg Ryan, Sandra Bullock, those types. I didn't see myself in any of those women except for in their dorkiness, the dorky characters that they played. But when they would do things that I would do, the results are very different. So it's just, I think what I'm trying to say is those movies set up unreal expectations, and they also were full of a lot of um, misogynistic, what's the word? I don't know, writing, I guess. The writing was slanted in the wrong direction. Like the woman had to be with a straight, usually white man to be happy. She it was that was more important than anything for her to, and I know it's a romantic comedy, so you'd think that romance is the most important thing, but I just don't think movies that promote that are realistic or healthy. So I like that we have that younger generations, I think, are a smarter audience than I was. As a millennial, when I was a kid, I feel like I was not as smart of an audience as, the 18 and younger crowd these days. They understand more about life than I did, and they know more of what is right and what is wrong than I did. So I appreciate that now we have movies that, feature all kinds of people. You don't just have one person of color, you have a lot of people of color. Um, and And you don't have just one queer person, you have a lot. Um, it just, I like that movies show feature all sorts of people. And that, oh, another thing I forgot to mention, sorry, I'm all over the place today, is that the perfect guy, usually that character was written as not having very much depth. He just mostly listened. So it's like he didn't bring that much baggage, except for usually that he could not commit because he hadn't found the right woman. Okay, that is so unrealistic. Men have as much baggage as women. And as a kid watching that, that also sets up unrealistic romantic expectations because you're thinking, oh, I'm gonna meet this guy and everything's gonna be great because, you know, he's gonna be super safe and um not have any issues. But no, 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 that's not what a relationship is. It's like two people who have a lot of baggage and their own separate histories come together to help each other out. And to help someone, you have to be strong enough to carry their baggage. That's just the way love works. It's work. But romantic comedies from, olden times, they didn't really show the work. And I know that we don't go to the movies thinking of them as a classroom for life, but that is what they are. Um, Netflix, the TV shows that we watch, the streamed series, all of that, it all educates us. So I'm glad that these days the education has gotten a little better. There's still a lot that needs to change, but at least we're getting there slowly, I think. I think Hollywood's doing a little bit of better job than it did when I was a kid, slightly better. Um, Also, I think if you're watching this, which I don't know how you made it through this long-winded video. I applaud you. But if you're watching this, it probably means you have an interest in like movies and stories, storytelling. Why don't you write a movie? Like, write a script that reflects your real life experiences and try to get it made or make it into a book or something because I feel like we need more real stories. Stuff that doesn't follow some out of touch executives formula that they've come up with it in their head. Like these rich, not that there's anything wrong with being rich, but a lot of these guys who run these studios, they live in a bubble. They don't know what life is really like for the rest of us. Um, so if you're a writer or a storyteller, please write a real story and then get it made and I'll watch it. Okay, that's all. Thanks for watching this. Bye.